Customerland is a podcast about customers, how to get more of them, how to keep them, what makes them tick. We talk to the experts, the technologies, and occasionally actual people, customers, to find out what they're all about. So if you're a CX pro, a loyalty marketer, a brand owner, an agency planner, if you're a CRM and personalization geek, if you're a customer service, CSAT, NPS nerd, you finally have a home. I'm Mike Giambattista. Welcome to Customerland. So today I am honored again to be talking to Peter van der Putten, who's director of Pega's AI lab. And if you were part of our podcast audience several months ago, Peter and I were talking about some of the, I would just call it the media cycle hype issues that AI was generating at the moment. But AI is moving fast in our marketplaces, and the perceptions of it are growing. The utilities of it are growing. The worries of it are growing. And Peter sits right in the middle of all of that, running Pega's AI lab. So first, let me just thank you for joining me, because this is going to be a lot of fun.
Yeah, it's great to be here.
So I would like to focus at least a part of today's conversation on how companies should be thinking about ethics and AI, because AI, the utility of it is exploding, not only in what you can do with it, but how many companies are deploying it in various ways. And there are a handful of people, I know yourself among them, who are concerned with and working out issues related to ethics and AI. So tell us, if you would, just what that looks like on a day-to-day basis at Pega's AI lab.
Yeah, no, great. Yeah, indeed. And, I don't think sometimes people think about ethics as, almost like a scary thing, or, that's the department that says no, right? So, whereas I think for us, ethics is, it's ultimately more about how to lead a good life. So even as a company, how to behave well. And that ultimately is also something that pays off, right? So I'm not a firm believer in that there's a trade-off between ethics and, having a profitable business, for example. I see it the other way around. I think there's only one sustainable route towards long-term profit, and also towards long-term use of AI is use it in an ethical and trustworthy manner. So that makes it a lot more kind of an interesting and exciting topic. It's not a topic around we're not the no police. It's more about the yes police in a way, right?
Interesting. Because I know that in some conversations I've had on this topic, there seems to be a kind of a sliding scale between ethical AI and profitable use of AI, as if it's an either-or proposition. And I agree with you that it is not an either-or. You can have and should have both to be worked out effectively. But you're probably the only person I know who's at least a component of your job is to work that out.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah.
So that to me means that you're part evangelist, but partially as well you're baking in ethics into the work that you're doing at Pega.
Yeah, because it shouldn't just be talk, right? So you should be able to kind of operationalize that ethics into kind of let's say, for us, into real working software, because ultimately, we are an enterprise software provider, but for our clients, into experiences and interactions with our customers, that are, valuable to both, right? Because I think that's the most easiest way to kind of, or the most high level way to boil down ethical use of AI is simply, don't do to others what you don't want to have done to yourself, right? So how you need to make sure that you balance the benefits for all stakeholders, the company, or if you're the government, your interest as a government, as well as the customer or the citizen or the partner, whoever you're dealing with, right? So, and that's not an either or, right? So, like you said, so if I give you maybe, and I think that's the most important thing, because people talk a lot about these ethical principles like bias and fairness and transparency and robustness, and for sure we're going to come back to those topics here in the podcast. But I think the more fundamental issue is making sure that you serve the purposes of, let's say, all stakeholders in these interactions and processes where you're using AI. And so, in a marketing example, for example, that could be, like, let's say, you have like a large libraries of recommendations you could give to customers, right? Well, first off, you want to make sure that you trim in a particular, let's say, there is a particular interaction with the customer. Customer opens up the mobile app, and you want to make some recommendations. Yeah. So first off, you want to make sure that you apply some, hard rules potentially, which encode your ethical policy around. Yeah, it's awesome that your AI predicts that this person will click on the, give me a $2.5 million mortgage with the picture of the nice house with the pool. But if you're it makes sense that if you're like a 14-year-old, that's something that gets you excited, right? But we're not selling these mortgages to 14-year-olds, right? So it's even applying some of those simple kind of ethical rules, to narrow down, in this case, the universe of messages you could talk about. But then the next step is you're left with a lot of things that might still be relevant. So the key question then becomes, how do you prioritize? Are you going to prioritize on profit? Like, we make a lot more money on mortgages and credit cards. Or are you going to look at like, hey, but what is most relevant for this customer right now? What are they most likely to be interested in? And then that could go. And so that you can see here, this is something that you can actually operationalize, right? So if you rank those messages, is it purely on likelihood for this to be interesting? Or are you taking, factors like what's the margin we make on these offers into account? Yeah. So and that's where you can actually strike a balance. Yeah. Also, when you think about, what is our library of messages that we could potentially talk about? You could say, well, we just want to focus on hardcore sales, but you can also say, no, we also need to have some of these software service messages in there, or we also need to focus on not how we can get more value out of the customer, but how the customer can get more value out of the relationship, right? So making sure that they use the products and services that they're entitled to, yeah, or even have recommendations that are not your products and services, but that do fit your mission, yeah. So one of our banks, they say we want our customers to be, we want to ensure, enhance and secure their financial well-being. Well, so some of the recommendations they make, they have to do with all kinds of governance benefits these banking clients could qualify for. And so you're not selling a banking product, but you are doing what your mission is telling you to do, and which is, enhancing and securing the financial well-being of your customers, right?
In a sense, that it reminds me a little bit of the early days of programmatic advertising on the web, when somebody figured out that algorithmically we could serve enough of these kinds of ads that we would make enormous amounts of money without any consideration for what that felt like on the customer side. And I'm sure there are those actors right now who are leveraging AI for those purposes, but I think I'm just going to call you an evangelist because it seems appropriate in this context. People like yourself who are actively talking about, and I love the way you just put this, that not just extracting value from the customer, but delivering value on behalf of the company, that it's not going to take too long for this ship to kind of right itself and start balancing itself out. And I know that reputable players, which is almost everybody that I see out there, are working in that same direction. But there are always profit motives behind everything. Let's face it.
Yeah.
That's a lot of the stakeholders are profit-minded people. But I think there's going to be a maturation of this, and hopefully the fear mongering that we've seen in the media, and AI stole my baby, and the craziness that we've seen out there will start to kind of fade away, and we'll get down to a level of utility where AI is an expected component of any enterprise's toolbox. It's not just this wild thing that's going to, rob people of their jobs and make us millions and millions of dollars.
Yeah, no, absolutely. Yeah, because we also did some research and on a panel of 5,000 customers globally, and their 2/3 said that they expect that most major departments in a company, and not just these customer-facing departments like customer service and marketing, whatever, but let's say virtually any department in an organization will be run using AI and automation in the foreseeable future, right? So I think in a way, customers already have high expectations in that sense. And of course, they expect it to be used in their best interest. As a customer, I don't mind if my bank makes profit, actually, right? But as long as there's a bit of a win-win. I think that's why this particular example, the marketing example, is a good one, because this idea of a win-win, it's not just talk, right? So let's say you lean more in towards, rather than saying, I'll just go for whatever the likelihood of a click and what's the margin on that offer, or even more purely, I don't care about that likelihood, but I only care about the margin, then customers are going to check out. And you're training them to that whatever you feed them, something that's good for you, but not good for them. So they're simply not, you're not going to have success on your marketing messages in that example. And that's even exaggerated or extrapolated if some of those messages are being delivered indirectly, and maybe through agents in the contact center, because they're constantly talking to customers. So if they see that whatever that's being recommended is not relevant, they'll check out. They'll stop using the system. And they might type in some phony offers and say the customer didn't want it. Right? So this is why, it's gonna pay off, to do the right thing, right? To quote Spike Lee, my favorite filmmaker, right? It does pay off, it does, ultimately earn you more money as well, right? So it's the right thing to do.
It layers in and leverages a longer term customer value equation for sure. It's on the one hand, but the fact that you are focused on what you're focused on at a company like Pega doesn't really surprise me. My first interactions with Pega were speaking with one of your colleagues several years before you and I were connected, and we were talking about empathy at scale. So even, I don't know, maybe 5 years ago or something like that, a company that was focused on building technologies that could deliver customer experiences embedded with empathy, real, genuine human empathy. And that's a complicated topic, and hard. It's difficult to figure that out in all the different contexts. I thought it was impressive at the time, but take that forward 5 years or whatever it's been, and you're in the middle of Pega's AI lab focused on things like ethics and AI and how to deliver technology solutions that have ethics at the core of them. So
exactly, you have to really embed it into those capabilities. How to make it real, right? And not just real, but you also need to make it easy. Let's face it, we're all lazy human beings to some degree, right? So you really need to make it easy, attractive to actually work with AI in that particular way, and then the rest will follow. But this idea of empathy at scale, it might have been Rob Walker you've been talking to.
It was Robin Collier.
Oh, Robin Collier, there you go. But empathy at scale, that's a great concept. And I think people sometimes think that empathy is all about emotional intelligence. And of course, yes, emotional intelligence is important beyond IQ, but I think there's an even deeper kind of expectation behind empathy, and that's the moral expectation, not even the emotional empathic expectation, but the moral expectation that whenever we engage, we have joint interest, right? So you do what's right, not just for you, but also for me, and I think that's something you can, given the marketing example just gave, it's something that you can really operationalize in these large-scale, automated, autonomous, AI-driven decisioning systems. Yeah, and I gave a marketing example, but the same applies to customer service or to intelligent automation or customer operations. I mean, any of those processes. That's one of the developments in the last 5 years that we kind of branched out from using it primarily into this kind of one-to-one customer engagement space to making sure that you can do this across all of your customer interactions, across all of your business processes ultimately.
Allant is an audience orchestration engine leveraging data, analytics, experience management, and MarTech integration to power the solutions behind successful customer journeys. Everything they do is based on the proven principle that customers want a more relevant, less intrusive, and privacy-centered relationship with brands, and they want to interact with brands on their terms, with their needs in mind in the channels they choose. Allant gives some of the largest and best-known brands in their category a competitive advantage to deliver better lifecycle experiences, to individualize, nurture, and energize the relationship between the brand and their customers. Check them out at allantgroup.com. That's ALLANT group.com.
That gives me two ideas. One is that the next time we do this, we should invite Spike Lee into the conversation, see what he has to say about it. It'd be great fun. But two, and a hair more practically, is to talk a little bit about how Pega is actually doing that. What products are, and is Pega deploying LLMs and ethical AI, and how do you do that? I mean, how does that really get worked out? Because it's one thing to talk about it and what a great idea it is, but it's a complex undertaking.
Yeah, absolutely. I kind of hinted at this, the ultimate principle, which is do what's right, not just do the right thing. Yeah, to quote Spike Lee again. And the right thing is not just what's right for you, but also for the other, right? So, and one of the example that I gave was if you really think about in that marketing example on how to prioritize what to talk about, you can lean towards what's right for the customer, what is something which is good for the customer or that they're interested in. But there's also other elements. So, we can make sure that when you make those automated decisions, and maybe the cool kids with the AI startups to make you think we have this big super duper large language model or, black box reinforcement learning engine, and it will take care of all of it. But that's not how it works, right? So you probably will want to embed your particular strategies, your particular policies, particular business rules, on top of those models. There's something that an automated decision on what to recommend to a customer, for example, there's a lot more that goes into it than just predicting the likelihood to accept those recommendations. So you need to have the ability to deal with all these kind of classical AI systems, the good old boring business rules, on top of it, to translate all those predictions, but combine it with your business knowledge and strategies and policies, to turn it into a decision, what to do. Yeah, so that's another element of how to operationalize all of this. And then probably you want to do things like make trade-offs around transparency. There are certain bits of AI, certain, let's say, machine learning models that are highly accurate, but they're less transparent. Yeah? It's harder to understand how these predictions are being made, which might be fine for some form of marketing decision, but it's not fine for, let's say, if you have a core model that decides on whether someone can get a loan or not, right? So you need to be able to make those trade-off decisions in terms of transparency and accuracy when you decide on what types of AI to use. Also, what you want to do is to make sure that you test for things like bias, and to make sure that you keep your automated decisions fair, right? So can you maybe run some simulation on some historical data? In this example where I want to, let's say, decide automatically on who gets a loan or not, it's nice because you don't have to constantly talk to some bank employee to know whether you can borrow something. It can be a quick interaction in your mobile app. So customers in principle love that. If we have that logic and models and data that's driving that, how can you make sure that there's no bias that crept into those decisions, be it in the training data of the models, but it could also be just in some of the hard-coded rules that you apply. And so you need to be able to test for that. Is my bias within limits before I launch that new logic? And then you want to be able to keep monitoring and tracking that as and when these kind of AI decisions are being made, right? So, but then that's important for you as a company to monitor what's going on, right? But also at a lower level, like when I would pass on those marketing recommendations to a customer service agent, it's nice if you can give some automated explanation, like how did I get to that decision, right? Or maybe even directly to a customer. Yeah, so that monitoring is not just for your own employees. It could be all the way down to providing those automated explanations back to end users like agents or customers. Yeah, and then generative AI also adds some additional kind of challenges into the mix that you need to take into account. For example, the use of proprietary data. If you're using particular data, can we send it on to like some central service like OpenAI, or is this particular use case or data too proprietary? Yeah, and we first want to filter out any of the proprietary data, either in the prompts or in the output that we get returned. Yeah, or we even don't want to send it to a public service. We want to use some private large language model because this is information that should never ever leave, the company, right? So
right, the house.
Those are some of the particular challenges and solutions more in the generative AI space.
You just made me think of something that you're talking about building in all of the nuances of ethics and morality, if you will, into the large language models. And, for everything that I read about AI and all of the fascinating new, whatever it is, the shiny objects of the moment, and there are millions of them coming out every day. I've yet to hear anybody really talk about tuning your large language model to reflect your brand values. I mean, it's one thing to have a large language model that works itself out with some AI capabilities to solve problems where it's problem solution, question answer in the customer service world, but and to do that ethically, or produce advertising and segmentation models that are done ethically. But I see a lot of people talking about the wonders of generative AI for the marketing, advertising, customer experience worlds, because of all the great tools that'll save us loads of time and all that. But nobody's really talking about using or tuning their large language models to reflect values that are important to the company and are important to the customer. And it seems to me like I would really like to see that. And you touched on it. You have to have the values baked in, and the language there to reflect that too.
Yeah, absolutely. I agree. Yeah. And so, for example, and then you can do that at multiple levels, right? So you can take the output, whether it's these large language models or more traditional machine learning models, like I think automated decisions or interactions, it's never just a model, right? So And that's why I spoke about good old-fashioned AI, the classical business rules that you actually stick on top of them, where you can control them. But particularly in the area of generative AI, there's lots of stuff you can also do, not just through kind of training those models, which is kind of very costly, but even in clever prompt engineering, right? So, if you say, let's say I want to generate some creatives using generative AI, you can be quite specific about, in addition to details about a particular offer or product or whatever it is, that it should also reflect certain brand values, right? So, and if you want to codify that, then, you don't want your marketers to go off and just hammer stuff into ChatGPT manually. You want to build it really into a workflow right, where you can make sure that those elements of the prompt are also there, right? Some standard elements of your prompts to make sure that whatever's being generated adheres with the brand values that you want to communicate, right? In addition to other kind of constructs that you may want to put into the prompt, like an example that we use a lot is to use different persuasion styles based on Cialdini, the social proof and authority, whatever. So there's a lot of things that you can steer in the prompt, and some of them could be more geared towards making sure your message resonates, or that you get better outcomes and results, Cialdini, but also it could be more around making sure that it aligns with your brand values, which is the other example I gave.
So you and Pega have come out with 3 basic high-level column rules for deploying AI ethically at an enterprise level, and I'm just going to read them off here, but I'd love to spend a few minutes just unpacking them. Number 1, leverage AI as a starting point. In other words, it's not the end all be all. It is the starting point. Second, read the results. And third, balance value with responsibility. And we've talked about some of this, but I think breaking that down for companies and individuals who are considering scaling up their AI usage or building it out from scratch, these are great ways to evaluate or at least set up your own processes. Is this how you do this internally?
We constantly look at what are some good principles to follow. The AI is a starting point. I think that's where and it also depends a little bit on your definition of AI. Like in a very narrow definition, when people think machine learning, etc., then it's already kind of this realization that to get to a decision, even if it's an automated decision, there's a lot more that goes into the mix. Like I said, basically maybe these business rules that encode your ethical policies, or maybe parts in the prompt that define your brand values. But also when you think about AI just starting point, then it's also thinking about is there a human in the loop? Is there a human before the loop? Is the human somewhere, right? So maybe back to because we're using the marketing example as a running example anyway. I don't believe that we want, at least in the short term, we don't want to have Gen AI getting into an interaction and completely on the fly coming up with some kind of a, offer or marketing recommendation. Yeah, because I think it's important to be in control. What we can't have is, you go to your website and we need to wait for the market to decide on what banner to show. Right, so essentially you want to have a human kind of almost like before the loop, right? So use a lot of the creative powers of generative AI maybe to come up with new interesting propositions and treatments, or maybe to refresh those treatments and messages that don't really resonate. But there will always be then kind of a sign off from the marketer, like, hey, these are good, great new creatives to use. And that's basically the right brain that helped out. Then it's the human that comes in the loop and says like, I approve this message, to put it a little bit into, let's say, what we hear in all those commercials.
Right.
This is Peter and I approve of this message. But then it goes into the library, and then maybe the left brain, the automated left brain kicks in and prioritizes those messages, etc. Right? So you make a good use of AI and automation at scale and MPD at scale at the critical point. In this case, when do we decide whether to release these new treatments into our library of possible recommendations? That's a critical point where Peter says Peter approves of this message, right?
Interesting.
That's where AI. Well, that's maybe something in the direction of this. AI is a starting point.
The second and third points: read the results. It's self-explanatory. What's happening? Evaluate it. Retool as needed. And then thirdly, balance value with responsibility, which goes back to almost everything we've been talking about thus far, which is value not just for the company, the profit motive, but also delivering value from the company to the customer.
Yeah, and I mean, it's a high-level principle. I think that's a very healthy principle to keep in mind, right? Because you can use it with virtually any use case. You can think about that principle and make sure that that you're delivering on that, right? So, in the marketing principle, I explain it in terms of how do you decide how to rank those messages, or how do you make sure that you have interesting messages to talk about, not just your hardcore sales. In the loan application example, it could be making sure that you provide the right levels of transparency about how you got to this decision, even if it's a no. No, we can't give you this loan. Or if it's a no, if you're thinking about best interest, is there a way to come up with alternatives, right? To still make sure that we can provide maybe let's say a smaller loan to this customer to help this customer with their problems, right?
A plan B, or some way to preserve the relationship.
Yeah, exactly. Or if I can see, well, I'm making a lot of money on this over-debted customer, but if I consolidate these credit card loans into something which has lower rate interest, I might be losing money in the short term as a bank, but it's the right thing to do for my customer, right?
Right.
And and right now it's maybe a cash trap, a challenged, maybe I just got out of college and I just got my new job and I had to make, a lot of expenses, and it just simply became too much. I maxed out my 3 credit cards. But 5 years from now, I'm a wealthy individual, right? So if you help me through this period, you just signed up a customer for life.
Yeah. Well, I honestly, this always happens when we talk about these kinds of things, but I've got over 30 questions and another 15 topics I'd love to just sit here and chat about. But maybe we'll make that a third installment of this conversation when we can get Spike Lee onto the chat here. But for now, Peter, I can't thank you enough for the time in the conversation, but I think even more broadly for being one of those handful of people who are dedicating themselves to the ethics of AI and making sure that that has a place in the corporate conversation.